Hi, everybody, and welcome to Bedtime Science, the place where your curiosity gets cozy and your questions gently unravel. The fridge hums softly behind you. You open the door, reach for your usual turkey sandwich supplies, and nothing. Not a single slice of ham, no rotisserie chicken, no salmon steaks winking from their plastic trays. The meat aisle at the store? Empty. A dull echo where the sizzling once began. You probably won't survive this. Okay, that's dramatic, but let's just say the world is about to shift in a way your gut and your BBQ-loving uncle wasn't remotely prepared for. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me where you're listening from and what time it is where you are. I love knowing who's out there with me in the dark. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake up one Tuesday, and for reasons ranging from climate change to moral reckoning to a collective allergic reaction to bacon grease, humans everywhere have just stopped eating meat. No fanfare, no government mandate. It's as if every culture, household, and fast food chain simultaneously snapped out of a long carnivorous trance and said, "Yeah, we're good." The grills are cold, the smokehouses silent. Chicken nuggets, those oddly comforting beige lumps, vanish like relics of a meat-based mythology. You're standing in line at the grocery store, and people are rediscovering beets. A kid is poking a jackfruit with a look of suspicion usually reserved for clowns and dental tools. Everything smells a little earthier. The freezer section is now just walls of tofu, tempeh, and slightly confused frozen peas wondering why they're suddenly center stage. For the first few days, your body is in a weird place. Some people report bursts of energy. Others, a foggy brain and vague crankiness, the same way you feel when you switch from coffee to green tea and pretend it's better for you. You're not detoxing exactly. Let's not lean into that overused word, but your systems are realigning. Your digestive tract, which has spent decades dealing with charred protein and caramelized animal fat, is looking around like, wait, where did all the ribeye go? This isn't the first time a civilization has collectively adjusted its diet. The ancient Egyptians, for example, had periods where meat was reserved only for the wealthy and religious ceremonies. The peasants mostly lived on bread, onions, lentils, and beer, which oddly enough doesn't sound that bad. Historians still argue whether that diet was by choice or necessity, but your modern self is essentially joining their ranks, minus the linen skirts and pyramid taxes. Day 3. You're standing in your kitchen again, slicing mushrooms like they owe you money. You're improvising dinner with lentils, squash, and something called nutritional yeast, which you desperately hope tastes less like drywall than it sounds. There's a strange calm to it all. No meat juices pooling on the cutting board. No weird rubbery sinews to navigate with your paring knife. You start to notice the colors, vivid reds, greens, oranges. The food feels alive, not hunted. On a quirky note, early 20th century food reformers like John Harvey Kellogg, yes, the cereal guy, were already campaigning for a meatless society. He believed vegetarianism was key to moral purity and even spiritual clarity. He also invented cornflakes to curb impure thoughts, so maybe take that with a grain of salt. Or in his case, probably none at all. Fast forward a week. You're at a friend's house, and the group is sharing dishes with ingredients like jackfruit pulled pork, chickpea tuna salad, and vegan chorizo made from something you vaguely recognize as lentils wearing sunglasses and pretending to be spicy sausage. No one's completely sure what's going on, but everyone's trying, except Brad. Brad brought quinoa and left early. You begin to notice more subtle changes. No food coma after meals. Fewer afternoon crashes. Your skin doesn't feel as inflamed, and somehow your armpits smell less like panic sweat and more like nothing. You're not sure if it's the absence of meat or the sudden introduction of kale, but either way, it's oddly pleasant. A friend messages you a photo of a burger-shaped beet monstrosity with the caption, "We're doomed." And maybe, yeah, a part of you grieves. There's something deeply primal about the shared experience of roasting meat over fire. It taps into some ancient ritual, some smoke-scented memory stitched into the human timeline. Removing it? It's like erasing a campfire song from your cultural playlist. But here's the surprise: you don't miss it as much as you expected. Your taste buds, those fussy little dopamine addicts, start recalibrating. Flavors you once overlooked: umami-rich mushrooms, caramelized onions, roasted eggplant become front row acts. Your plate starts resembling an art piece instead of a battlefield. Meanwhile, the meat industry is in free fall. Ranches are being auctioned off, not for grazing, but for rewilding and solar farms. Factory farms close down one after another, their giant metallic sheds left behind like empty shells from an industrial past. The global food economy starts spinning into a new orbit. Commodity prices shift. Croplands pivot. Agriculture braces for its biggest identity crisis since the invention of the tractor. In a whisper of poetic irony, tofu, once mocked as tasteless and weird, becomes the new gold standard. The soy boys have risen. Somewhere in California, a hipster high-fives a tempeh block. But here's where it gets really wild. You're not alone in this change. Your gut bacteria are evolving with you. Those trillions of microbial freeloaders, used to a steady stream of animal fat and protein, begin to adapt. Fiber-loving strains flourish. Others retreat, sulking like kids denied candy. It's like an ecosystem reboot happening inside your belly, a microscopic migration from steak to sweet potatoes. And so, in this new meatless world, you take your first real breath. The air feels lighter. Or maybe that's just your lungs thanking you for ditching the bacon-wrapped everything. Tomorrow, your microbiome begins its true journey, and it's going to be a little gassy. You don't remember eating this many beans. Ever. Not even during that short-lived burrito obsession in college. But now your cupboards are stacked like a legume library: black beans, chickpeas, red lentils, mung beans, and a can of fava beans that looks vaguely haunted. And your gut? Oh, it notices. By day 4, the gas is active. It's not exactly a problem, more of an announcement. Your intestines are clearly trying to learn a new language, and right now it's all vowel sounds and bubbling consonants. But don't worry, it's a temporary phase. Your microbiome is essentially being dropped into a new country without a translator. It needs time to adapt, to shake hands with new neighbors, to swap meat-metabolizing microbes for fiber-loving fermenters. Scientists still debate the exact timelines of gut adaptation, but one thing's clear: when you stop eating meat, your digestive system shifts direction. Animal proteins, especially those from red meats, promote the growth of certain bacterial strains like bacteroids. These little guys are efficient, but not always gentle. They tend to produce more putrefactive compounds. Yep, you heard that right. That can lead to inflammation and even damage the intestinal lining over time. Now that you're feeding yourself a rainbow of plants, legumes, whole grains, and nuts, the gut climate changes. It's like firing half your old bacteria crew and bringing in the kale-waving, kombucha-drinking newcomers. Prevotella strains, known to flourish on high-fiber diets, start showing up and laying down roots. These microbes love to make short-chain fatty acids, which sounds like science homework, but actually helps reduce colon cancer risks and boost immunity. It's like discovering that your insides can host a wellness retreat. And remember, this isn't just about digestion. Your gut and brain are weirdly codependent. They text each other constantly. Ever felt butterflies before a big event? That's them chatting. As your microbiome adjusts, some people report mood lifts, sharper focus, and a slight reduction in that ever-present existential hum. Historians still argue whether ancient Ayurvedic and Chinese medicine systems knew this gut-brain axis by intuition or just sheer trial and error, but their plant-heavy prescriptions suddenly feel vindicated. Still, don't expect overnight miracles. While your digestion may improve over weeks, other changes are more subtle. Your bowel movements become suspiciously regular like clockwork. You stop experiencing those post-steak nap comas. Instead, your body seems lighter. It's as if internal housekeeping is underway and everything's getting a nice microbial polish. Let's rewind to something fringe, just for fun. In 1920s California, a fruitarian colony sprung up in the hills outside LA. They believed that eating only raw fruit and nuts could purify the body and spirit. Some even claim their poop no longer smelled. Bold statement. Also, possibly delusional. But you do notice that something's shifted in yours, not to get too personal. There's less of that sulfur-heavy funk, more of an earthy, compost-adjacent aroma. You make a mental note never to tell anyone that out loud. Your stomach feels less acidic. Meat takes time and effort to digest. It sits longer, demands more stomach acid, and leaves a bigger footprint in your internal schedule. Without it, your digestion becomes a sleek, well-oiled train. Sure, tofu might be bland, but your gut processes it like a dream. And the fiber? Oh, the fiber. You're getting triple what you used to, which isn't always graceful at first, but your colon is basically writing you thank you notes. You start noticing something else. Your energy is more consistent. No more meat-induced roller coasters of sluggish highs and carb-craving crashes. Meals made with lentils, brown rice, sweet potatoes, and greens digest steadily, releasing energy like a slow-burning log. You find yourself walking more, fidgeting less. One day you wake up without an alarm. Suspicious. Delightful. Culturally, this shift starts showing up in odd places. TV chefs begin exploring century-old recipes that skipped meat by necessity, not choice. Peasant dishes like Tuscan ribollita, Ethiopian misirwad, and Indian chana masala get the spotlight. Suddenly, it's not about replicating meat, it's about elevating plants. You find a YouTube video of a monk from a Korean temple preparing 17-ingredient mushroom stew, and you bookmark it with mild reverence. Fun twist? Your body odor changes. Studies have shown that people on plant-based diets often emit less pungent sweat. It's not that you don't sweat anymore. You are not turning into some serene anime character. It just smells cleaner. Less iron and garlic, more green tea and sunlight. You sniff your shirt one afternoon and blink. Did you just smell like oat milk? Of course, this isn't universal. Some folks struggle. Their bodies rebel, at least temporarily. Cravings hit hard. They feel lightheaded or weak or just plain irritable. This could be a sign of undereating, missing nutrients, or simply nostalgia masquerading as hunger. If you spent years depending on meat for fullness, flavor, and even comfort, its absence feels like emotional hunger, not just physical. But as your gut balances, those feelings tend to fade. Your tongue, too, is slowly rewiring. Those salty, fatty, umami notes that meat used to dominate, they're now being triggered by seaweed, miso, caramelized onions, sun-dried tomatoes, and roasted garlic. You stop expecting chickpeas to taste like chicken and just let them be chickpeas. You start craving texture instead of animal fat. You learn to toast your walnuts. You say umami in casual conversation without sounding like a poser. A historical note to chew on. During World War I and II, meatless days were promoted across several countries. Meatless Mondays weren't just catchy, they were national survival strategies. Governments urged citizens to grow vegetables and cut meat for the war effort. It wasn't ideology, it was resource management. And guess what? People adapted. They even liked it. Some historians argue whether this led to a temporary dip in chronic diseases, but the record hints at a subtle health boost. Back in your modern kitchen, you roast some cauliflower with turmeric, garlic, and olive oil. It browns at the edges, crackles in the pan. You bite into it and surprise it satisfies. Not in a fake meat kind of way, in a my body is weirdly into this kind of way. And so your gut, once a churning factory for meat and potatoes, becomes a greenhouse. It grows, it flourishes. And as the microbial garden inside you transforms, so does your relationship with food. You're not just eating anymore, you're cultivating. Up next, let's talk about the almighty protein panic and why your muscles aren't going anywhere. You're 3 weeks in, standing in front of your bathroom mirror, flexing like someone who just got back from one yoga class and now thinks they understand the body. You don't look weaker. In fact, you might look a little leaner, maybe even more defined depending on the lighting and how forgiving your t-shirt is. Still, the question starts buzzing in your head like a fruit fly near a ripe banana. Am I getting enough protein? Ah, yes. The grand meatless anxiety. It's almost a rite of passage. The first time you tell someone you are not eating meat anymore, They'll squint at you like you've announced plans to survive on rainwater and vibes alone. Then they'll mutter something like, but what about protein? Let's clear the tofu-scented air. Protein is essential. It's the builder, the repair crew, the microscopic scaffolding of every muscle fiber, hormone, and enzyme in your body. The average adult needs roughly zero point 0.8 grams per kilogram of body weight daily or more if you're athletic, pregnant, or simply trying to win an arm wrestling contest at a Renaissance fair. Now here's the meatless twist: plants have protein. They don't brag about it. They don't come sizzling on a skillet or wrapped in bacon, but they do. Lentils, about 18 grams per cooked cup. Tofu, around 20 grams in a standard block. Quinoa, not just protein-rich, but a complete protein, meaning it contains all 9 essential amino acids. Basically, quinoa is the overachiever of the grain world. No one invited it to the party, but it brought snacks and helped clean up afterward. Your kidneys, by the way, are whispering "thank you" while sipping herbal tea. High meat consumption, especially red and processed meats, has long been linked to increased kidney strain. All that nitrogen and metabolic waste isn't exactly spa treatment for your filtering organs. A lower protein, plant-forward diet can give them a break. You might not hear their applause, but inside there's a tiny renal standing ovation. But let's pause for a mainstream detour. In ancient Sparta, yes, the warrior dudes' young boys were raised on a famously simple diet: barley porridge, figs, cheese, and very little meat. It wasn't all war cries and sword clanging. Most days were filled with bread, lentils, and more running than any reasonable child should endure. Historians still argue whether their low-meat diet made them tougher or just more irritable, but no one disputes they were lean, strong, and impressively durable. Back to you, you start scanning food labels now, with the sort of casual intensity once reserved for dating app bios. You realize hummus, chia seeds, tempeh, and spirulina, yes, the blue-green algae, all pull their weight in the protein department. Even peas are on your team: green, humble, underappreciated, and somehow they've ended up in everything from protein powders to faux meat patties. Speaking of faux meat, you try one there, maybe out of curiosity, maybe to prove something to your inner carnivore. It sizzles in the pan, smells suspiciously close to an actual burger, and when you bite in, yeah, it's not bad. Not exactly a religious experience, but familiar enough to trick your palate into relaxing. These high-tech plant meats, built in labs with pea protein and beet juice, straddle the uncanny valley between nostalgia and novelty. They're not healthy by default, but they're a safety net, a crunchy stepping stone for those still grieving bacon. Then there's the peanut butter trap. You get bold one night, eat 3 spoonfuls straight from the mom, and convince yourself it's for the protein. Technically true, also technically dessert. Moderation remains a thing, even in this bean-forward utopia. A strange benefit emerges as you eat more plant proteins. You feel fuller longer. The fiber slows digestion, stretches your stomach gently, and tells your brain, hey, we're good down here. You snack less, or rather you snack better. An apple with almond butter becomes your new afternoon romance. And for once, you are not raiding the fridge at 9 p.m. like a raccoon on a sugar bender. There's one more voice that joins the conversation: your liver. Quiet, overworked, and deeply underappreciated, your liver processes every nutrient, toxin, and cocktail you toss its way. Meat-heavy diets, especially those high in saturated fats, can contribute to fatty liver disease over time. Switching to plant proteins doesn't just reduce this risk, it makes the liver's job easier. Imagine your liver finally getting a weekend off, lounging in a hammock with a chickpea smoothie. But let's not swing too far into the sunshine. There's nuance here. Plant proteins are often less bioavailable than animal ones, meaning your body has to work a bit harder to extract what it needs. This is where diversity matters: mixing beans with rice, tossing nuts onto salads, trying that weird fermented lentil pancake you saw on TikTok. These combos ensure you're getting the full amino acid profile without having to memorize any scary charts. There's also a moment of realization. You're not just replacing meat, you're learning to eat on purpose. You're not tossing a slab of protein on a plate and calling it dinner. You're building meals now, layering flavors, colors, textures. Your plate starts looking like something out of a Mediterranean cafe. You eat slower, you chew more, you don't need a nap afterward. A small but mighty evolution. For a touch of the bizarre, you stumble on an old ad from 1898, where meat extract was marketed as a miracle cure for everything from fatigue to heartbreak. Yes, people once drank concentrated beef juice for vitality. Historians still argue whether this was brilliant marketing or collective delusion. But one thing's for sure, you're probably better off with that lentil curry. And still your strength holds. You walk upstairs without huffing. You hit the gym and your muscles don't vanish. They recover. They adapt. Studies even show that plant-based athletes can build muscle and maintain endurance just as well as their meat-eating counterparts, sometimes better thanks to reduced inflammation and faster recovery times. So you flex again, not because you've bulked up overnight, but because you feel solid, nourished, like your body has finally figured out how to fuel itself without drama. Your protein panic dissolves like miso in broth. You've got this. Next, it's time to grieve and reinvent the meats you once loved. It hits you during lunch, mid-bite of a smoky grilled eggplant wrap, you miss bacon. Not just the taste, the vibe, the Saturday morning smell, the hiss of fat in a cast iron pan, the way it made the whole house feel like brunch was about to solve all your problems. You stare down at your turmeric hummus and think, you're good, but you're not bacon good. Welcome to the grieving stage of going meatless. This isn't just about flavor. This is cultural, emotional, maybe even a little spiritual. You weren't just giving up burgers, you were giving up your grandfather's chili, tailgates, backyard cookouts, that sketchy but perfect corner deli pastrami. Meat, for many people, isn't just food, it's ritual, memory, identity, and now your identity has a lentil in it. It's okay to mourn. In fact, it's necessary. Historians still argue whether medieval European fasting traditions, where meat was forbidden for weeks at a time, were acts of piety or forced penance disguised as virtue. Either way, people found ways to cope. They smoked fish like it was a love language. They made stews with chestnuts and mushrooms so rich they could pass as roast beast. You do the modern equivalent. You tinker. You experiment. You start cooking mushrooms like they owe you rent, sautéing, roasting, even pressing them flat for that golden brown sear that makes your brain whisper steak. You discover that smoked paprika is basically cheating. You build umami like a sandcastle. Tamari, balsamic, roasted garlic, sun-dried tomato paste, miso. You layer flavors like you're covering up a crime scene. And slowly your cravings evolve. The first time you try crispy tempeh in a peanut glaze, you stare at the plate for a full 5 seconds before nodding like a solemn judge. It doesn't taste like meat, but it does taste like enough. Still, some flavors are hard to let go. Enter the meat doppelgangers. Faux sausage, knot dogs, soy chorizo. They're not fooling anyone, but they're trying hard. You grill one and smother it in mustard and kraut, and for 2 bites you feel like you're at a baseball game. Close enough, you begin to appreciate them not as replacements, but as their own weird genre like ska music or 1990s superhero movies. Flawed, nostalgic, oddly satisfying. Some people skip the imitations entirely. Others find comfort in them. In ancient China, Buddhist monks famously created mock meats from wheat, gluten, and tofu, carving them into duck shapes and dyeing them with beet juice. Not for deceit, just for familiarity. Food was, and is, how we soothe ourselves. And sometimes you want a tofu drumstick shaped like a peacock feather. Who are we to judge? But meat isn't just taste, it's texture. The chew, the sear, the bite back. You learn to play with that. You roast cauliflower steaks until they're charred at the edges. You press tofu under books like it's a college essay. You crisp chickpeas. You marinate jackfruit. You slow cook lentils until they mimic the warm, satisfying mush of ground meat without the post-taco nap of doom. And one day, you eat a veggie burger that doesn't pretend. No beet-bleeding patty, no lab-grown sci-fi cube. Just black beans, oats, cumin, and a crisp crust from a cast iron pan. It doesn't taste like beef. It tastes like its own thing, and it's amazing. Your palate, once stubborn and nostalgic, has recalibrated. You're not chasing steak anymore. You're chasing satisfaction. Let's dip into the fringe for a second. There's a small but passionate internet community that swears by raw vegan meat, things like dehydrated walnuts, sun-dried tomatoes, and spices blended into what they lovingly call taco crumble. It sounds horrifying. It's actually not bad. You try it once on a dare, your own dare, and it tastes oddly like road trip gas station taco meat. In a good way, this reinvention isn't limited to home kitchens. Restaurants begin leaning into veg dishes that don't hide behind meat analogs. Ethiopian injera platters, Korean temple cuisine, Lebanese mujadara dishes that never needed meat to begin with are now the stars. You realize that whole cultures have been thriving on plants for millennia without ever asking, but where's the protein? Your relationship with meat memories shifts. You don't crave the object anymore. You crave the experience, the warmth, the nostalgia, the comfort. And now you know how to recreate that. A smoky bowl of lentil chili brings back Sunday football. Grilled seitan skewers make you think of summer bonfires. You invent new rituals. Still, there's the odd dream where you're at a barbecue and someone hands you a bratwurst and you take a bite and wake up in a cold sweat, whispering, "Is seitan a carb?" It happens. Food memory is powerful. Bacon's grip on the soul is not to be underestimated. But the beauty lies in choice. You're not abstaining out of punishment. You're exploring, evolving. You're swapping ingredients but keeping the joy. And that's what sticks. Quick fun fact. In the 1970s, the U.S. military developed a soy-based meat substitute for troops called TSP, textured soy protein. It was unappreciated. Soldiers called it Tuesday Surprise. Today's plant meats are light years tastier, but the idea that we can simulate meat from plants isn't new. We just have better branding and seasoning now. So tonight you roast portobellos with balsamic and rosemary. You serve them on crusty bread with caramelized onions. You take a bite and close your eyes. You don't miss meat tonight, you just eat. And next, we'll talk bones literally. What happens to your skeleton without animal products? You're standing on one leg in the shower, trying to scrub your foot without falling over, and suddenly it hits you. Wait, what's happening to my bones? It's a fair question. You've ditched the meat, maybe even dairy, and now you're haunted by every calcium-fortified ad you saw in childhood. You're picturing yourself as a brittle scarecrow by next Thursday. Relax. Let's talk bone health. Bones aren't just creepy Halloween props, they're dynamic living tissues. Your skeleton is constantly remodeling itself, like that one friend who can't stop rearranging their living room. Old bone cells break down, new ones build up. And to keep that process humming, your body needs the right materials. Calcium, vitamin D, magnesium, phosphorus, and yes, protein. Here's where things get spicy. Meat isn't the only ticket to bone strength. You're not doomed to osteoporosis just because you traded chicken thighs for chickpeas. In fact, your new plant-forward diet might be doing you a quiet favor. Research shows that populations with low meat intake like traditional rural Asians or certain African communities often have lower rates of hip fractures, despite consuming less calcium overall. Historians still argue whether this is due to lifestyle, genetics, or diet variety, but it's clear, bones are more than just dairy deposits. Still, you'll want to pay attention. Calcium is real. It's not just a conspiracy from the milk lobby. Without enough, your body starts mining it from your skeleton like a panicked landlord pulling up floorboards. That's why you need a game plan, and it starts with the green stuff. Spinach, kale, bok choy, broccoli. These aren't just salad filler. They're leafy calcium bombs. Then there's fortified plant milks, tofu, made with calcium sulfate, check the label, tahini, mawans, and even chia seeds. Those weird little blobs that look like frog eggs in pudding, but somehow make your bones sing. Vitamin D is the other half of the duo. Without it, calcium can't be absorbed properly, like trying to mail a package with no postage. Sunlight helps about 10 to 20 minutes a day, depending on skin tone and cloud moodiness. But if you live somewhere gloomy or wear SPF like it's your job, a supplement might be necessary. You're still cool. Just glow from within. Here's a twist. Animal protein, especially in excess, may actually leach calcium from bones due to increased acid load. Your kidneys buffer this acidity with calcium, often borrowed from your skeleton. Some experts debate how serious this effect is. Others argue the benefits of meat protein outweigh the risks. And yes, historians still argue whether the 20th century milk craze in America was health-driven or just a byproduct of World War II surplus dairy campaigns. But your plant-based plate, it brings balance. Most plant foods are alkaline forming. They don't stress your kidneys, don't demand calcium bailouts. They're the chill roommates of digestion. For bone strength, though, food isn't everything. Movement matters. You can eat all the tahini in the world, but if you never stress your bones with resistance or impact, they'll act like neglected houseplants. So you walk, you do yoga, you jump a little. Maybe you take the stairs like a smug legend. Each footfall sends microscopic build me signals to your skeleton. You are quite literally dancing your bones stronger. Let's dip into the quirky for a sec. In the 1800s, a British health movement called natural hygiene encouraged people to sunbathe nude for stronger bones. Full sun exposure, zero tan lines, maximal vitamin D. Some even added air baths to the mix standing in breezes to oxygenate the skin. Your shower yoga is starting to feel tame, huh? Now back to protein. You do need it for bone matrix integrity. Yes, that's a real term. And lucky for you, you've already nailed that in section 3. Lentils, beans, tofu, nuts. These keep your bone scaffolding intact. Even collagen, that trendy supplement flooding Instagram, is just another form of protein. Whether it helps or not is still debated, but bone broth's not the only game in town. Zinc and magnesium? You're probably getting those too. Seeds, nuts, legumes, whole grains, they're sneaky mineral bombs. And if you're going heavy on processed plant foods, take a breath. Just don't let the frozen aisle be your new home. Whole foods nourish bones in ways lab patties never will. You start to feel grounded in your skeleton. Not brittle, not worried, just aware. You sit up straighter, you stretch more. You even start doing calf raises while brushing your teeth, like someone who read 2 articles and is now a personal trainer. Let's peek at the historical stage again. Ancient Romans swore by hard cheese for strong bones and even gave it to soldiers before battle. They also bathed in milk and thought vinegar kept bones soft. We're still ironing out the science, but one thing's certain, Romans were very committed to calcium in both culinary and confusing ways. As you transition away from meat, you start checking in with your posture, with your balance. You notice how your joints feel. You maybe try Pilates and immediately discover you have zero control over your lower abdominals. It's humbling, but also empowering. Your body feels connected, intentional, supported by more than just meat-based myths. One last thing, bone health isn't all about avoiding fractures at age 80. It's about daily strength, balance, vitality. It's about how you move through space, how you bounce back from stress, how you carry yourself, literally. And every plant you eat, every walk you take, every sunshine session on your porch in questionable pajamas, it all adds up. So the next time someone says, "But what about your bones?" you smile politely, sip your fortified oat milk, and go do a wall sit like the steady bone champion you are. Next up, what happens to your bathroom routine when meat disappears from the plate? It's 8:10 a.m. on a Wednesday, and you are perched, let's be honest, on the toilet, reading your phone and wondering, is this normal? Because your digestion has definitely changed. Things are busier, more expressive, maybe even a bit dramatic. Don't worry, your gut is adjusting to your new meatless reality, and like any diva deprived of center stage, it's making sure you notice. Here's the backstage scoop. Dropping meat and diving into plants means your fiber intake just went from meh to overachiever. Fiber is like the stage manager of your digestive system. It keeps things moving, balances the schedule, and throws a spotlight on any system glitch. Meat, it has no fiber, none. Zilch. So now that you've gone full veggie or vegan, your intestines are hosting a fiber party and everyone's invited. At first, it's chaos. Gas, bloating, gurgles that sound like a distant thunderstorm rolling in from your lower abdomen. But that's just your gut microbiome freaking out in a good way. See, your gut isn't just plumbing, it's an ecosystem. And like any good jungle, it responds dramatically to change. When meat leaves the plate, the carnivorous microbes that loved protein-heavy meals start packing up. Meanwhile, fiber-loving bacteria like bifidobacterium and lactobacillus move in, set up shop, and get busy fermenting all that chickpea glory. Fermentation means gas, but gas means growth. Your new gut flora are building a better biome, one toot at a time. Historians still argue whether ancient Egyptian bread packed with whole grains and fermented dough was used medicinally for digestive issues. But it's clear they understood the gut-food connection long before probiotics came in tiny glass bottles. Now back to you. You're pooping more. Let's say it plainly. And probably faster, maybe softer, maybe surprisingly scheduled. Some days it's like your bowels are running ahead of your alarm clock. Other days, it's smooth sailing like your intestines just got promoted to first class. This isn't a bug, it's a feature. Fiber doesn't just bulk up stool, it feeds the good bacteria that create short-chain fatty acids, which reduce inflammation, support immunity, and even improve mood. That's right, your gut makes neurotransmitters. Serotonin, that little joy molecule, over 90% of it is made in your gut. So yeah, those lentils might actually be making you emotionally stable. Let's sprinkle in something quirky. In the 1600s France, physicians prescribed beets and figs as intestinal lubricants and suggested eating leeks under a full moon to ensure divine regularity. Probably didn't work, but you've got to admire the commitment to celestial bowel movements. But it's not always heavenly. Early on, you may feel bloated like you swallowed a balloon full of kale. That's just your gut adjusting. Your intestinal lining is adapting, your bacteria are diversifying, and your system is rebooting. It takes time. Be patient, and maybe light a candle. You also start noticing your body's feedback more clearly. With meat, digestion was slower, sometimes heavier. Meals lingered. Now you feel lighter. Meals pass through like they've got places to be. You're not weighed down, you're evacuated. You even start experimenting. Split peas, predictable. Black beans, manageable. Raw onions, emotional sabotage. You learn which foods are worth the bloat and which ones are banned pre-date night. You become a digestive ninja. Let's hit one more scholarly hot topic. The transit time debate. That's how long it takes food to go from mouth to well, the other end. Meat-heavy diets can slow that time down, sometimes dramatically. Plant-based diets speed things up. Some researchers argue this faster transit reduces the risk of colon cancer. Others say more data is needed. But the trend is clear. When fiber goes up, risk tends to go down. You also notice your fragrance changes. Stool odor, we're talking. You know scientifically, meat proteins putrefy in the gut, producing sulfur compounds. Plants, meanwhile, tend to smell less like a chemical spill and more like earthy produce aisle vibes. Not perfect, but gentler. And there's the frequency factor. You used to go once a day, maybe skip a day. Now it's like clockwork. You could set your watch to it. Your body loves routine. It loves that you're feeding it predictably, regularly, with foods it recognizes and appreciates. Like a barista who's finally memorized your oat milk order. Hydration helps. With more fiber, you need more water to move things along. Think of your gut as a slip and slide, fun when wet, disaster when dry. So you up your water intake, maybe add lemon, maybe go fancy with mint. Your intestines applaud quietly. There's even a new elegance to your elimination. Less strain, less surprise. You sit, scroll for 2 minutes, and you're done. You leave the bathroom feeling lighter, smug, and just a little too proud. It's okay. Celebrate your wins. From a historical lens, the ancient Romans were obsessed with regularity. They built public toilets with running water and carried personal sponges on sticks. They even carved diet advice into bathroom walls. Beans are fine, but lentils divine. possibly the first Yelp review of vegan digestion. Of course, not everyone has a blissful transition. Some people need digestive enzymes at first. Others find that raw, cruciferous veggies need to be steamed to avoid their bloat of doom effect. It's all about learning your gut's love language. And once you're over the transition hump, you glow, not metaphorically okay, maybe a little. Your skin clears up. Your belly softens. You feel light, like your body is humming on a cleaner frequency. You're not just eating food, you're digesting vitality. And next time someone jokes, "Don't beans make you fart?" you nod solemnly and whisper, "They also make you invincible." So next up, let's talk cravings, not the midnight snack kind, but what your body secretly starts missing or doesn't. You're standing in the kitchen at 9:42 p.m., staring into your fridge like it's about to confess a secret. The hummus stares back. A lone carrot looks vaguely judgmental. And suddenly a craving hits sharp, primal, oddly specific. Bacon. But here's the twist. It's not the meat you miss, it's the memory of it. The salt, the crisp, the ritual. The way it's sizzled in a pan while your brain's still booted up in the morning. You're not mourning protein, you're mourning biases. Your body, meanwhile, has its own agenda. Now that you've cut out meat, it's going through a craving detox, a biochemical recalibration. And it's weird. Cravings are not just willpower failures. They're complex chemical signals, little brain blips that say, "Hey, remember that thing that gave us calories, dopamine, and emotional closure? Can we do that again?" Meat used to be one of those things, especially fatty meats. Your brain loved the combo of protein plus fat plus umami. It felt safe, rewarding, sometimes even nostalgic. Historians still argue whether medieval feast cravings were born from true nutritional deficiency or just celebratory instinct. But one thing's sure, when people fasted or abstained, their dreams got vivid. Like roast peacock on a unicorn vivid. Cravings aren't new, they're part of the human drama. Now that meat's off the menu, your body starts experimenting. It whispers strange things. You suddenly want olives, miso, roasted nuts, or a perfectly charred mushroom. Why? Because your taste buds are seeking umami, that rich, savory fifth flavor we all crave. And surprise, it doesn't belong solely to steak. Mushrooms, seaweed, tomatoes, soy sauce, fermented foods, all plant-based umami bombs. Your body's not begging for meat, it's begging for depth. And once you figure that out, you start cooking differently. You caramelize onions longer. You toast your spices. You add tamari to stews and say things like, "This needs more body," while feeling like a low-budget Gordon Ramsay. But cravings aren't just about flavor. Sometimes they're about nutrients. Iron, B12, zinc, those are common minerals your body links with meat. And during your transition, your brain might get a little dramatic. You haven't had heme iron in days. Panic. Never mind that you've been eating lentils, pumpkin seeds, and fortified cereals. Your inner caveman is suspicious. This is where conscious choices matter. You learn about non-heme iron. You pair it with vitamin C, like adding bell peppers to your beans, so absorption improves. You figure out your B12 strategy. Supplement, fortified plant milk, nutritional yeast on popcorn like a wizard's cheese dust. You got this. Let's add a fringe tidbit to the mix. There's a rare disorder called pica, where people crave non-food items like chalk or clay, often due to mineral deficiencies. Ancient Greeks believed pregnant women who ate dirt were seeking the essence of earth. Today, we'd call that a zinc deficiency or just a really wild pregnancy craving. But you're doing fine. You don't want clay. You just really want that one sandwich you used to get at 2 a.m. after karaoke. It had melted cheese, maybe pastrami, and enough grease to waterproof a canoe. It's not nutrition, it's nostalgia. And that's okay. Food isn't just sustenance. It's ritual, comfort, identity. When you cut out meat, you're also cutting out part of your story. The cookouts, the family recipes, the holiday turkey, and sometimes the craving isn't in your stomach, it's in your heart. So what do? You rewire the rituals. You find a lentil loaf that reminds you of grandma's meatloaf, minus the heartburn. You try jackfruit tacos and feel weirdly delighted. You bake a nut roast with wild rice and rosemary, and suddenly your holiday table feels complete. Not identical, but complete. Here's a clever trick. Map cravings to nutrients. Craving red meat? You might need iron. Want salty chicken? Could be a sodium dip or emotional comfort. Longing for eggs? Maybe it's choline, or maybe it's brunch culture, whispering sweet nothings. You also notice what cravings don't come back. You thought you'd miss hot dogs, but you really don't. You thought you'd mourn pepperoni, but it turns out smoked paprika and sun-dried tomatoes together scratch that itch just fine. Some cravings shrink, others fade entirely. And a few, they shapeshift. You start craving texture, crunch, chew, melt, crisp. So you start roasting chickpeas until they snap like popcorn. You freeze banana slices in dark chocolate. You toast sourdough until it sounds like a forest floor underfoot. And then there's the wild one. You crave freshness. That clean, zippy, lemony hit from raw veggies, herbs, citrus. Your palate has recalibrated. Where once you reached for sausage, now you reach for snap peas and hummus and call it a snack. The transformation is real. Not overnight, but steady. And at some point, maybe around month 3, you realize something profound. Your cravings have caught up to your choices. They're no longer pleading for the past. They're celebrating the now. And when someone waves a bacon cheeseburger in your face like a challenge, you don't even flinch. You smell the grease, smile faintly, and then go back to your roasted sweet potatoes and tahini drizzle. Because you're not deprived, you're just upgraded. Next, we're heading into your blood. Spoiler, the shifts aren't just cosmetic, they're microscopic and kind of amazing. Your blood is quieter now, not in the spooky, uh-oh, something's wrong way, but in the gentle, humming efficiency of a well-tuned engine. Imagine all the microscopic highways inside you veins, arteries, capillaries buzzing, along with less drama. That's the vibe. Because when you stop eating meat for a while, your blood starts to redecorate. It doesn't slam the door on its old carnivorous self, but it does take a long look in the mirror and say, maybe it's time for a cleanse. First up, cholesterol. Let's be honest. You didn't exactly have a cholesterol poster hanging in your bedroom as a kid. But now that you're older, wiser, and reading ingredient labels like they're poetry, you know it matters. Meat, especially red and processed kinds, can send your LDL, the so-called bad cholesterol, skyward. It's not just the fat itself, but also how your body processes the saturated stuff. When you remove meat, particularly fatty cuts, your cholesterol profile tends to chill out. LDL levels drop. HDL, the good kind, often holds steady or even rises a smidge. Your arteries quietly say thank you. Historians still argue whether Roman gladiators were mostly vegetarian for ideological reasons or just because meat was too expensive for mass training. But modern bone analysis shows their diet was largely plant-based, grain-heavy, low in fat, and surprisingly heart-healthy. Kind of poetic, really, all that violence powered by lentils. Your blood pressure likes the change, too. Salt, salt, preservatives, and saturated fats and processed meats are like triple shots of espresso to your circulatory system. They tighten blood vessels and raise pressure. Plants, on the other hand, come loaded with potassium, magnesium, and antioxidants, nature's chill pills. As your plate shifts, your pressure often settles. But not instantly. The first few weeks, you might actually feel worse, maybe a bit tired, lightheaded, even cranky. Your blood sugar may fluctuate as you swap meat for more carbs. Whole grains? Good. White toast and jam? Delicious, but chaos. Here's where things get fun. Plant-based eaters often end up with thinner blood, not in the "I might float away" sense, but in how easily it flows. Less viscosity, fewer clots. Some researchers theorize this could mean reduced risk of stroke or heart attack long-term, though the science is still evolving. More data needed, they always say. Scientists, the ultimate buzzkills. Let's pivot to a quirky blood-related fact. In the 1600s, European physicians believed drinking the blood of freshly executed criminals, they could treat epilepsy. Yeah, vita ex sanguine, they called it. Life from blood. Pretty medals. Also, incredibly disturbing. Today we prefer green smoothies, thanks. Now let's talk iron. It's true that red meat contains heme iron, which your body absorbs easily. Without it, you might experience a dip in iron levels, especially if you're menstruating, pregnant, or running marathons for fun or punishment. But here's the kicker: non-heme iron, the kind from plants, still works. It just needs a little vitamin C chaperone to get invited to the bloodstream party. So you start combining spinach with citrus, beans with bell peppers, tofu with broccoli. You basically become a nutrient matchmaker. Still, some people notice signs of anemia, fatigue, dizziness, pale skin. That's your cue to test your blood. Because even though plant-based diets can improve overall cardiovascular health, they require mindfulness. Iron supplements exist. So do fortified cereals, and there's no shame in using either. Then there's inflammation, the villain of so many health sagas. Chronic meat-heavy diets, especially processed ones, are linked with higher levels of inflammation markers in the blood, like CRP. Plants, especially leafy greens, berries, turmeric, and nuts, seem to lower those markers over time. Your joints creak less, your skin calms down. Your immune system stops acting like it's on red alert 24/7. But remember, not all plant-based diets are healthy. You can live on fries and vegan cookies and technically never touch meat. Your blood would disagree. Processed junk is still processed junk, whether it came from a cow or a cashew. Now here's something to ponder at 2 a.m. Your blood sugar control improves, usually. Complex carbs from legumes and whole grains release glucose slowly, keeping your levels steady. But if you swap meat for constant pasta binges, your pancreas might have a few words. This is where fiber steps in again. It slows digestion, buffers blood sugar, and keeps insulin whispers, not shouts. Over time, this means lower risk of type 2 diabetes. In fact, some studies suggest long-term vegetarians and vegans have a 50% reduced risk. But again, quality matters. Sweet potatoes? Yes. 3 slices of vegan cake? Maybe don't. Fringe fact. In the 1930s, a researcher named Dr. Walter Kempner used a bizarre rice and fruit diet to reverse high blood pressure and kidney disease. His patients ate mostly rice, bananas, and juice. Their blood markers improved. Their spirits? Debatable. And while we're nerding out, your white blood cells, the immune warriors, may become more efficient. Some studies show improved immune response in people eating antioxidant-rich plant diets. Others suggest no change. Historians of nutrition, yes, that's a thing, debate whether ancient plant-heavy diets were protective against disease or just reflective of scarcity. Back to your bloodstream, you notice something else. You bleed differently. Paper cuts don't feel as dramatic. Bruises seem lighter. Nosebleeds vanish. Your platelets might be less sticky. Your clotting more precise. Or maybe you're just clumsy less often now that you're not in a meat-induced brain fog. Oh, right cognition. Your blood flow to the brain improves slightly, in some cases, with a healthier diet. More oxygen. Better glucose regulation, sharper focus. You're not suddenly Einstein, but you might remember where you left your keys. Sometimes. And finally, your blood just feels cleaner. You can't see it, of course, but you feel it in your recovery, your energy, the way your body responds after workouts or long days. Your cells are happier. They're thriving on vitamins, minerals, hydration, and fiber. They're not wading through heavy lipids and preservatives. You're not superhuman, but you're optimized, and your blood flowing silently beneath it all is proof. So now that we've peeked inside your circulatory system, let's go deeper still to the part of you that never clocks out, your immune system. That overworked bouncer at the nightclub of your life. Your immune system used to be a little high-strung, the kind of bouncer who tackled people for wearing the wrong shoes, mistook sneezes for threats, and overreacted to just about everything, including your own cells. But now, since you stopped eating meat for a while, the bouncer has chilled out. He's still alert, still vigilant, but no longer paranoid. There's more nuance to his job now, more wisdom in the watchtower. You don't notice this shift right away, of course. You still catch the occasional cold. You still get that one stubborn zit every month. But over time, there's a new baseline. Fewer sick days, less inflammation, cuts heal faster, maybe your seasonal allergies stop trying to kill you. It all starts in the gut. Over 70% of your immune system lives in your gastrointestinal tract. And when you swapped meat-heavy meals for fiber-rich plants, you gave your gut microbes the ultimate party favor: prebiotics. Think of them as fermented snacks for the good bacteria, the ones that make short-chain fatty acids, regulate immune function, and help decide whether you spend winters sniffling or smug. Historians still argue whether Hippocrates meant it literally when he said, "All disease begins in the gut." But modern science leans in that direction, especially when you realize your microbiome isn't just helping you digest lentils, it's coaching your T cells, managing inflammation, and sometimes deciding whether you get sick in the first place. Cutting meat reduces exposure to something else too: endotoxins. These are bacterial fragments found in animal products, especially processed meats, that can leak into the bloodstream and trigger systemic inflammation. You might not feel it right away, but your immune system does. And when that low-grade inflammation becomes chronic, things go sideways. Joint pain, fatigue, brain fog, even autoimmune flare-ups. By stepping away from meat, you remove a major source of these immune agitators. And your body notices. Slowly, quietly, your defenses sharpen while your alarms mellow out. Now, that's not to say meat eaters are all chronically inflamed zombies. The human body is absurdly adaptable, but on a population level, plant-heavy diets correlate with lower rates of diseases that scream immune dysfunction, like type 2 diabetes, rheumatoid arthritis, and even some cancers. Let's talk about white blood cells, those little sentinels of your immune fortress. Some studies suggest that people who go plant-based have better regulated WBC counts, not too high, not too low, a balanced immune army ready to fight infection without setting the whole castle on fire. And there's another perk: antioxidants. Meat contains none. Plants are loaded. Vitamin C, E, beta-carotene, polyphenols. They're like tiny shields that protect your cells from oxidative stress, the kind of stress that leads to cellular breakdown, premature aging, and immune fatigue. Fringe tidbit time. In ancient China, immune health was so deeply entwined with diet that entire dynasties funded food therapy clinics. Royal physicians prescribed root vegetables, fungi, and seaweed not just for nourishment, but to strengthen the body's vital life force. Today, we'd call that micronutrient optimization. But hey, she sounds cooler. Meanwhile, back in your 21st century kitchen, your immune system's response has become more targeted. Less collateral damage. You eat turmeric roasted chickpeas and feel smug because curcumin is a known anti-inflammatory. You drink ginger tea and actually feel like it's doing something. And it is. These compounds gently nudge your immune pathways into smarter responses. But there's a trade-off. Some meat-free folks report more viral infections, especially if they're new to the switch and not supplementing properly. Low zinc, selenium, or vitamin D can leave gaps in the armor. It's not about the meat, it's about the nutrients. And when you figure that out, you plug the gaps with nuts, seeds, sunlight, and smart supplements. Historians of modern medicine, yes, still a thing, debate whether the rise of industrial meat production in the 20th century improved public health through nutrition or worsened it through immune stress and antibiotic resistance. It's a valid debate. After all, over 70% of antibiotics in the US are used in livestock not to treat illness, but to make animals grow faster. Those residues can make their way into our bodies and tweak our immune responses in ways we barely understand. By quitting meat, even temporarily, you reduce your contact with that whole pharmaceutical farm drama. Your immune system gets to return to its factory settings: no antibiotics, no hormone residues, no cross-species baggage, just good old-fashioned vigilance. You might also notice fewer colds, or when you do get them, they resolve faster. Your mucus isn't thick and endless. Your sore throats don't drag into week 2. Some people report better responses to vaccines. The data here is still young and full of more studies needed, but the anecdotal chorus is loud. Even your skin joins the immune party. It's your first line of defense, after all. With less internal inflammation, fewer clogged pores, and more nutrient-dense meals, you might find your complexion clearer, your eczema quieter, and your random hives vanished. There's also the tired all the time immune burnout some people just live with, assuming it's normal. It's not. Chronic inflammation wears you out like bad Wi-Fi during a live stream. But plant-based nutrition often gives your immune system a breather. It doesn't need to fight invisible fires every day. So you feel steadier, more resilient, less like a walking tissue box. Now here's a truly weird fringe fact. In 18th century England, one physician believed that eating carrots could protect against the plague. His theory? The bright color repelled corrupt airs. Today we'd say carotenoids support mucosal immunity and eye health, which actually isn't so far off. All in all, the meatless stretch gives your immune system a sabbatical. It still works, still defends, still marches out T cells when needed, but it does so with a bit more grace. Less noise, more precision. It's like switching from a bazooka to a laser pointer. You won't notice it day to day, but when the flu goes around and you don't catch it, when your sinuses stay clear through allergy season, or when a paper cut heals in record time, you might just whisper, "Thanks, Kale." Now we've journeyed through your cravings, blood, and defenses. But what about the softest part of all? That fragile, stormy miracle of gray matter? Yep. We're headed to your brain next. Your brain has been watching all these changes quietly from its perch inside your skull, wrapped in cerebrospinal fluid, like royalty in a glass castle. It doesn't say much. It doesn't need to. But now that you've been off meat for a while, it starts sending subtle signals. Clearer thoughts, fewer mood swings, less fog, more spark. The elevator to the top floor is finally running smoothly again. You don't expect diet to affect your mental state quite so directly. Maybe you thought ditching meat would make you hangry for life. But what actually happens is a little weirder and a lot more interesting. First off, you probably underestimated how much your brain loves blood flow. Better circulation, remember that from section 8? Means more oxygen and glucose. Two things your neurons guzzle like teenagers with slushies. When your arteries unclog and your blood pressure drops, more of that fuel reaches your frontal lobe where the magic of attention, planning, and impulse control happens. You're not suddenly Sherlock Holmes, but you might finish a sentence without losing your train of thought halfway through. Or walk into a room and actually remember why you're there. Little victories. Let's sprinkle in some quirky history. In ancient India, Buddhist monks followed plant-based diets not just for compassion, but because they believed meat clouded the mind during meditation. Whether they were right or just tired of chewing jerky, the logic stuck. Even today, spiritual traditions often link plant eating with clarity of thought. But clarity comes in waves. For the first week or two off meat, you might feel a bit out of it. Not quite depressed, not exactly tired, but vaguely off-center. That's your brain rewiring its expectations. No more meat-induced dopamine spikes. No more heavy serotonin hits from fatty steaks. The reward circuits need new inputs like complex carbs, exercise, or that one podcast that makes you feel smarter than you really are. Here's where your neurotransmitters kick in. Tryptophan, the amino acid everyone blames for Thanksgiving naps, helps your body make serotonin, a key player in mood, sleep, and digestion. It exists in turkey, yes, but also in oats, pumpkin seeds, and bananas. Once you go meat-free, you may get less tryptophan overall, but more fiber and nutrients to help absorb and use it. So it balances out, sometimes better. Historians still argue whether the Viking berserkers ate special diets before battle to enter their trance-like fury states. Some claim they consumed hallucinogenic mushrooms. Others believe fasting and meat deprivation primed their minds for altered consciousness. Either way, the link between food and mental state is as old as storytelling. Back in the now, your anxiety may take a dip. Not a full-on plunge into Zen, but a noticeable lowering of background static. High meat diets, especially ones high in saturated fats and processed meats, have been linked in some studies to inflammation in the brain. And brain inflammation has been tentatively connected to depressive symptoms, memory trouble, and mood swings. So when you swap meat for leafy greens, nuts, and legumes, you also start dosing yourself with magnesium, B, vitamins, and omega-3 precursors nutrients that support calm, stable moods and good sleep. That last one's crucial because sleep is the unsung hero of mental health. And yes, fish contains direct forms of omega-3s, which help build healthy brain cells. But if you're avoiding animal products altogether, you can still make do with flax seeds, chia, walnuts, and algae oil. You just have to eat like someone who reads ingredient lists for fun. Let's not forget the gut-brain axis, that weird hotline between your digestive system and your prefrontal cortex. When your gut microbiome shifts to favor fiber-loving bacteria, it produces more short-chain fatty acids that, indirectly, can affect your mental clarity, memory, and even mood. Some scientists believe this could be the missing piece in treating chronic anxiety and depression. Others say, early days. Still worth chewing on. Fringe fact, in the 1920s, there was a movement called orthopathy, where people believed mental purity came from eating only raw, uncooked fruits and vegetables. They wrote dramatic manifestos and opened clinics. Did it work? Maybe for some. Did they also become painfully constipated? Probably. You notice something else, you're less irritable. It's not that you suddenly love traffic or enjoy slow walkers at the airport, but your fuse is longer. Your reactions, softer. And you start to wonder, was meat somehow spiking your stress? It's possible. Some meat contains residual hormones from the animal cortisol, adrenaline, especially if the animal was stressed before slaughter. While those levels are low, chronic exposure might subtly influence your own stress axis. Or maybe it's just that plant-heavy meals stabilize blood sugar better, and being hangry becomes a rare thing instead of a daily visitor. Historians still argue whether early hunter-gatherer societies experienced modern depression or whether that's a purely post-industrial problem. Some researchers point to lower rates of mental illness in pre-agricultural communities. Others say the data is too murky to draw conclusions, especially when Neolithic skeletons don't come with therapy notes. Either way, it's clear your modern brain is sensitive to what you feed it. Now, there's a catch. If you're not supplementing properly, especially B12, which you can't get from plants, you might notice the opposite effect over time. Sluggish thoughts, mood dips, even memory issues. B12 is essential for nerve function and red blood cell production. Go too long without it, and your brain starts throwing tantrums. Subtle ones at first, then bigger ones. But most people figure it out in time. A B12 spray, a fortified cereal, a simple pill, crisis averted. And here's a thought. When your brain isn't weighed down by constant digestive demands, like breaking down a massive meat-heavy meal, it may free up more energy for mental tasks. You feel more motivated, more curious, more creative. Not always, but enough that you notice. Some people report vivid dreams after ditching meat. No one really knows why. Could be hormonal, could be placebo, could be your body processing emotional shifts along with physical ones. But it's common enough to be interesting and strange enough to be worth whispering about at 2 a.m. And if all else fails, you've got placebo power on your side. The simple belief that what you're doing is good for your brain, that alone boosts dopamine and improves mental performance. Brains are weird, but they respond to kindness, especially dietary kindness. So your mind feels clearer, a little sharper, a little calmer. It's not a miracle, but it's a shift. One you earn it through months of choices, lentil by lentil. Now, speaking of shifts, what happens when a whole community stops eating meat? When it's not just you, but your family, your street, maybe your entire city. Let's zoom out, way out. You wake up one morning, stroll into your kitchen, and realize, without fanfare or confetti, that your whole neighborhood has stopped eating meat. Not just you, not just your one friend who runs marathons on kale and grit. Everyone. The barbecue smoke is gone. The meat aisle at the grocery store, repurposed into a museum of nostalgic regret. And something about the air feels lighter, quieter, maybe even cleaner. It starts small. Local diners stop offering bacon. Your favorite taco truck swaps carne asada for seared jackfruit. The fast food place around the corner, they keep the fries but quietly retire the double cheeseburger. Nobody riots, nobody starves. They just adapt because humans do that better than we give ourselves credit for. And you start to notice changes beyond your own body. The city smells different. Not in a bad way, just more neutral, less of that low simmering animal grease aroma wafting from street vents. The trash doesn't reek quite as aggressively in July. Even the rats, those nosy nocturnal survivors, seem a little less interested in the dumpsters. A few blocks away, a new green space appears, a community garden. Someone puts up a tiny lending library filled with cookbooks titled things like Legume Love and 50 Shades of Soy. You joke about it, but then you check one out and actually learn to cook millet. Not bad, honestly. The shift starts making a dent in bigger places, too. Your local hospital reports fewer cases of foodborne illness. E. coli and salmonella outbreaks? Plummeting. No meat, no bacterial hitchhikers. And suddenly the nurses have more time. The ER feels less like a battlefield, more like a waiting room. Historians still argue whether modern meat sanitation protocols can keep up with industrial demand, but in this meat-free reality, that argument becomes academic. And here's a kicker. The water quality improves. It turns out that raising animals for food produces enormous amounts of waste, more than entire cities sometimes. When those waste lagoons vanish, so does a major source of nitrogen pollution. Nearby rivers and lakes begin to recover. Frogs return, birds follow, kids play near the water again, and parents don't panic. A quirky tidbit from history. In 17th century Japan, meat eating was restricted for over 1,200 years due to Buddhist influence. During that time, fish and plant farming flourished, and local communities developed incredibly efficient land use strategies like growing rice paddies that doubled as fish ponds. Ecology through cuisine. You notice your city's air quality shifting too. Fewer trucks rumbling in to deliver meat. Fewer massive cooling systems keeping carcasses chilled under 24/7. The carbon footprint doesn't vanish, but it steps down a size. Schools report fewer asthma flare-ups. Elderly residents spend more time outdoors. Even the birds seem chirpier. Or maybe that's just you. Food prices start to recalibrate. At first, the loss of industrial meat causes a temporary a spike in lentil demand, a chickpea shortage worthy of a slow-motion documentary voiceover. But then farmers pivot. More acreage goes toward vegetables, grains, and legumes. Eventually, supply catches up, and the cost of eating plant-based drops. You can finally buy an avocado without needing a loan. And here's the most unexpected shift. Social unity. Weird, right? But food is culture, and culture is shared. As more people eat similarly, potlucks become easier. Dietary labels vanish. No more awkward, "Is this vegan?" questions at office parties. People begin to bond over flavor instead of ideology. Cauliflower becomes surprisingly controversial, but only in the fun way. Historians still debate whether ancient communal feasts, like the Roman Saturnalia or early Jewish Passovers, were more about spiritual celebration or social glue. Likely both. In your new meatless city, something similar happens. Food unites. The dinner table becomes a peace treaty. Even schools change. Lunchtime becomes a lesson in sustainability. Kids learn how to cook plant-based meals in home ec again. Yes, they brought that back. Gardening becomes part of the science curriculum. Parents complain about the dirt under fingernails, but deep down, they're proud. These kids are growing spinach instead of swiping for dopamine. Of course, there are rebels, secret carnivores who grill steaks in their garage, midnight meat runners trading frozen chicken thighs like contraband. But over time, even they mellow. They realize they feel better eating less meat. They wake up without heartburn. They start to forget what they were defending. And something amazing happens on the citywide healthcare level. Hospitals begin to redirect resources. Fewer bypass surgeries, less dialysis, more funds for mental health, maternity care, and preventative programs. The budget stretches further than it used to, not because of magic, but because people just aren't as sick. A fringe anecdote. In the early 1900s, John Harvey Kellogg, yes, that Kellogg ran a wellness sanatorium where meat was banned and guests were treated with electric baths, enemas, and laughter therapy. He believed plant-based diets could cure everything from indigestion to sin. He was extreme, but the core idea of food as medicine, that part stuck. Meanwhile, back in your own kitchen, you notice your grocery shopping gets simpler. No more picking over slimy chicken packaging or stressing about expiration dates on raw meat. You buy produce, grains, beans. You learn which tofu doesn't taste like regret. You stop needing so many spices just to mask the flavor of something your body wasn't really craving in the first place. And as your city leans into the new norm, your food waste shrinks. No bones, no spoiled ground beef leaking in the fridge. Scraps go into compost bins. Some go back into those neighborhood gardens. The loop closes, the cycle tightens, and you feel oddly like you're part of something. You walk past a billboard one day, it reads, "We didn't change the world overnight. We just changed dinner." You smile, because it's true. And it all started with one person saying, what if I tried this for a while? Now it's a shared rhythm, a collective exhale, a reminder that progress doesn't always need a march or a hashtag. Sometimes it just needs a soup pot. But what about the big stuff? The planet, the climate, the global machinery of meat. What happens when everyone, not just your block, sets down the steak knife? Let's pull the camera all the way back. Zoom way out now, far beyond your neighborhood, beyond your city, even beyond the cowless counties and the pork-free provinces. You're in orbit, looking down at Earth, and something massive has shifted. Humanity has stopped eating meat. Just like that. No more industrial livestock farming, no more slaughterhouses, no more transport trucks hauling refrigerated carcasses across continents. A whole global system, centuries in the making, has hit pause, then delete. You blink. The changes are immediate. The first big ripple hits the land itself. Vast swaths of it, almost all of it, previously dedicated to grazing or growing feed crops like soy and corn for livestock, start going fallow. These aren't just backyard paddocks. We're talking about a third of all the planet's ice-free land. That's more than all the forests currently standing. And here's the wild thing. As the cows, pigs, and chickens fade from the scene, the earth starts to heal itself. Abandoned pastures burst into rewilding mode. Forests creep back across plains. Native grasses return. Biodiversity ticks up. You watch deer, wolves, butterflies, bees, and bacteria reclaim old territory like they've been waiting just off stage for centuries. Rainfall patterns shift. Rivers run truer, less interrupted by runoff or irrigation. Some scientists estimate that cutting meat from the global diet could free up land equal to the size of Africa. Historians still argue whether ancient civilizations like the Mayans were collapsed partly due to agricultural overreach, too much land taken, too many forests cleared for food. If that's true, then what we're seeing now might be the ultimate course correction. The climate? Oh, it notices. Without methane-spewing livestock, especially cows, who burp like it's a competitive sport, greenhouse gas emissions drop drastically. Agriculture accounts for around 14 to 18% of all global emissions, and meat is the biggest contributor. So when meat vanishes, you start dialing down the planet's fever. Satellites register less nitrous oxide from manure. Methane levels inch downward, and the carbon sinks all that rewilded land, start pulling CO2 out of the sky like nature's own air filter. Not enough to solve everything, but enough to buy precious time. Climate scientists have spent decades modeling how to limit warming to below 1.5 degrees C. One of the few achievable levers? Mass dietary change. You've just yanked that lever. A quirky historical note. During World War II, the UK government encouraged Dig for Victory campaigns. People grew veggies in parks and bomb craters. Meat was rationed, and people had no choice but to adapt. What happened? National health improved, life expectancy rose. Turned out sometimes less really is more. Now imagine the energy savings when meat's out of the picture. Industrial animal agriculture uses staggering amounts of fossil fuel for fertilizers, feed transport, slaughterhouse operations, refrigeration, and waste management. When it all vanishes, energy grids groan with relief. More power can go to schools, homes, and, yes, video game servers. And let's talk water. Raising 1 pound of beef can use over 1,800 gallons of water. Without meat production, aquifers start to refill. Rivers stop being diverted. The pressure on drought-prone areas eases. Farmers once locked in constant irrigation battles now grow food that feeds people directly, not livestock. Historians still debate whether Mesopotamia's agricultural collapse came from salinized soils due to over-irrigation. Whatever the cause, water mismanagement has toppled empires. So maybe this global meat exit is our modern empire's pivot point. Back to Earth's surface, global food availability skyrockets. Think about it. Most crops grown today go to feed animals, not people. When we grow food for humans instead of cows, global calories increase dramatically. Theoretically, we could feed 10 billion people comfortably on a plant-based system, maybe more. Famine doesn't disappear overnight, but it recedes. Countries once reliant on expensive meat imports start farming their own staples. Smallholder farms flourish. Local markets revive. Hunger, that ancient shadow, shrinks a little. You watch as international politics begin to shift. Countries no longer jockey over grain for cattle. The soy wars quiet down. Rainforests in Brazil, once bulldozed for cattle grazing, are left alone or reforested. Indigenous land rights become harder to ignore when deforestation slows. There are economic earthquakes, of course. Whole industries vanish. Jobs in meat packing, livestock transport, and factory farming evaporate. It's hard, disruptive, even traumatic in the short term. But new sectors emerge. Plant-based innovation, vertical farming, microbial proteins, regenerative permaculture. Retraining programs spring up like mushrooms after rain. A fringe but fascinating future tech. Scientists are working on precision fermentation, basically programming yeast or bacteria to produce proteins identical to those in meat, dairy, or eggs, without the animal. It's not mainstream yet, but it hints at a future where even hardcore carnivores might not miss a thing. Meanwhile, global health undergoes a quiet revolution. Fewer meat-borne pandemics. Remember those zoonotic diseases from Section 5? Most of them? Gone. The odds of another COVID-level event drop significantly. Wet markets vanish. Industrial farms, once viral hotbeds, are dismantled. Hospital systems breathe easier. Heart disease and type 2 diabetes rates fall. Antibiotic resistance slows, since antibiotics are no longer pumped into livestock by the ton. The World Health Organization issues a cautiously optimistic report. Humanity, it reads, has rediscovered balance between appetite and ecology. You think of that balance every time you open your pantry. Instead of dozens of brands pushing processed meats, there's now a kaleidoscope of grains, legumes, and spices from every continent. Food becomes cultural again, personal again, less standardized, more soulful. Historians still argue whether ancient trade routes like the Silk Road spread more culture or more disease. But in this new meatless world, global food exchange becomes a celebration, not a contagion. Even the animals notice. You won't see it all at once. But fewer factory farms mean less breeding of animals into captivity. Populations shrink not through slaughter, but through attrition. Eventually, the balance between humans and other species starts to feel less extractive, more respectful. Some zoos convert into sanctuaries. Others close. Documentaries pivot from exposing cruelty to capturing healing. You watch one about a former pig farm turned into a wildflower preserve. The farmer cries, but not from regret. And as all this unfolds, a strange, sweet truth settles in. No single person flipped this switch. It wasn't a decree, it was a collective exhale. Billions of small choices, lentil by lentil, stir-fry by stir-fry, adding up to transformation. The meatless world isn't perfect. It's still messy, still unequal, still struggling. But it's breathing, regenerating. And for the first time in a long time, it feels like the future has space to stretch its legs. Now, what about the soul of all this? The stuff beyond molecules and policy? What happens to the human culture, the ritual, the identity that's long been tied to meat? Let's open that door next. So here you are, in this meat-free world, feeling a little lighter in your body and brighter in your conscience. But now something deeper stirs. It's not about protein or methane or saving the wetlands. It's about your sense of self, culture, tradition, the stories we wrap around food like warm tortillas around memory. Because meat wasn't just fuel, it was symbol, identity, celebration, comfort. What do humans do when that disappears? You think back to your childhood. Maybe your grandmother roasted a chicken every Sunday, filling the house with that caramelized onion and garlic perfume that made even homework feel tolerable. Or maybe your dad's idea of bonding was singeing hamburgers in the backyard while offering unsolicited advice on how to flip them like a real man. Those rituals? They weren't just about taste, they were totems. So when humanity stopped eating meat, there was this strange cultural silence, a pause, as if someone had muted a long-running soundtrack. But humans are stubbornly inventive and sentimental. So instead of letting the silence linger, they started composing new soundtracks. New food rituals emerged, not as copies of the old, but as evolutions. Birthdays, once crowned with meat-stuffed banquets, now sparkle with rainbow vegetable tarts, towers of spiced rice, and elaborate fruit mosaics that are basically edible stained glass. Weddings replace roast beef with Moroccan taginis in mushroom Wellingtons that steal the spotlight and frankly are way less chewy. And the smell of the holidays? Still there. Still warm and buttery and cinnamon dusted. Only now it comes from roasted nuts, herb-stuffed squash, or puff pastry creations so delicate they should come with warning labels. Do not inhale near candle. Historians still argue whether the earliest sacred offerings, animal sacrifices in Mesopotamia or burnt lamb in ancient Israel, were more about feeding gods or feeding people under the cover of religion. But in this new world, sacredness returns to the act of cooking itself. It becomes meditative, reverent. People reinterpret old customs, not erase them. Your grandmother's chicken. Maybe now it's a seitan roast wrapped in rosemary and memory. Your dad's burgers? Lentil sweet potato sliders that he insists taste better because pride is generational and taste buds are surprisingly forgiving. Across the globe, cultures that once centered on meat find creative ways to pivot. In Argentina, the asado pit becomes a communal veggie grill. In Korea, bulgogi is reborn with grilled marinated mushrooms. Ethiopia's fasting traditions, which already avoided meat on religious days, become year-round models of abundance. Injera, lentils, stewed greens, they become ambassadors of a new kind of celebration. A quirky culinary fact, in the Ottoman Empire there was a whole class of palace chefs trained to cook elaborate meatless feasts during religious fasts. They competed to create the most intricate dishes using lentils, eggplants, and herbs. Some recipes were so beloved they stuck around long after the fasting ended. Now language begins to shift too. You hear fewer war metaphors around food, no more kill the cravings, meat sweats, or slaughtering that steak. Instead, cooking becomes more about harmony, creativity, and yes, play. Cooking shows evolve. Chefs stop screaming. The kitchen stops being a battlefield and starts resembling a jazz club. Improvisation, collaboration, and the occasional tomato-based solo. Historians still argue whether the French Revolution helped democratize cuisine or just elevated new elites through complex sauces. But in your world, food trickles down and lifts up. Community cooking classes pop up. People learn how to pickle, ferment, and spice things without a textbook or a trust fund. Even the family table becomes less tense, fewer dietary divides. No awkward, this is grass-fed, right? Confrontations. And those holiday arguments? Still loud, still passionate, but now it's over whether the vegan gravy should be chunky or smooth. Cultural identity doesn't evaporate, it adapts. Sometimes with grace, sometimes with delicious stubbornness. A Jamaican family invents a jackfruit jerk that slaps so hard it becomes a TikTok phenomenon. A Texan pitmaster starts dry smoking beets and mushrooms and calls it root Q. People laugh, then they taste it. Then they stop laughing. You see something else emerging too. Intergenerational memory passed through plant-based recipes. Not watered-down copies of meat dishes, but bold new expressions. Grandkids bond with elders over coconut stews, banana leaf wraps, dumplings stuffed with curried lentils. Culture doesn't weaken, it just breathes differently. And here's where it gets surprisingly spiritual. For many, removing meat from the plate becomes more than practical. It becomes philosophical. A gentle protest, a reverent pause. People talk more about compassion, ecology, intention. Meals become rituals of care. You sit down, you eat slowly, you talk about your day, not just with your mouth full, but your heart open. A fringe but real anecdote. In Jainism, an ancient Indian religion, devout practitioners avoid not only meat, but also root vegetables to minimize harm to living beings. Their kitchens are temples of mindfulness. In this new world, even if you're not Jain, that spirit of do no harm echoes softly behind every simmering pot. Restaurants evolve too. Fast food becomes fast beauty. Cuisines flourish. You see Burmese tea leaf salads next to Peruvian quinoa bowls, next to Lebanese muhadara, next to Kenyan sukuma wiki. No single cuisine dominates. Instead, there is this electric culinary polyphony, a symphony of textures, colors, histories. And that thing we used to call comfort food, it stays, but it widens. Comfort becomes less about greasy nostalgia and more about nourishment that whispers, you're safe, you're cared for. You begin to wonder, did we really need meat to feel full? Or was that just a story we told ourselves? A ritual handed down without question? Maybe the real comfort was never in the meat, but in the hands that prepared it, the people who gathered around it, the quiet moments between bites when everything else paused. So no, humanity didn't lose its culture when it stopped eating meat. It reimagined it. It planted new traditions. It let the flavors speak without the old noise. And in doing so, it discovered that meaning can be cooked in any kitchen, with any ingredients, as long as someone's heart is stirring the pot. You glance at the clock, almost bedtime. But before we drift off, there's one last ripple to explore. What if the meatless world doesn't stay hypothetical? What happens if this becomes the next chapter of human evolution? Let's finish the journey there. You stretch out, the covers bunching slightly around your legs, and picture it now. Not just the mechanics, not the proteins and policies, but something bigger. A fork in the timeline. A future where the human species, that scrappy, storytelling, stir-frying collective of contradictions, really does stop eating meat for good. No test run, no temporary cleanse, not even a slow decline. Just a steady, conscious drift toward plant-based living until one day pop meat is memory. It's not a revolution, not a toppling. It's more like when film went digital or when books went mostly pixels. Quiet, inevitable, and strangely emotional. You wonder, how does that change us? First off, something strange and almost poetic happens to the human body. Remember how we evolved as omnivores gnawing bones one century, farming millet the next? Well, when meat disappears long-term, the human microbiome starts to shift in a measurable way. Your gut, that teeming metropolis of bacteria, enzymes, and fungi, becomes less protein predator and more fiber philosopher. Scientists notice new dominant bacterial strains, ones better at fermenting legumes, digesting cellulose, synthesizing B vitamins. Some people need B12 supplements, sure, but over time the population adapts. Intestines get more efficient. Flatulence patterns change. You laugh, but future toilet paper companies build whole ad campaigns around the post-meat breeze. The humor never dies. There's debate among researchers about whether these biological changes mark a new stage in human evolution. Historians still argue whether the shift from foraging to farming fundamentally altered human anatomy. But this is another big pivot. Gut flora isn't just biology, it's a record of our relationship with the world. And speaking of world, the environment continues to respond, not with fireworks, but with a slow, proud nod. Air quality improves. Coral reefs stop bleaching quite so fast. The Amazon regrows inch by sacred inch. Climate targets that once seemed laughably out of reach now seem plausible. And then you look at education. Kids born into this meatless era learn recipes that once would have baffled their grandparents. They read books about the old meat days, the way we read about dial-up internet curious, confused, slightly horrified. Cafeteria menus sparkle with variety. Lentil dal one day, Korean japchae the next. Diversity blooms not just on the plate, but in taste memory. Palates widen. Cultural curiosity deepens. A quirky policy emerges in some countries. Flavor equity mandates. Governments ensure access to spices, herbs, and international ingredients in public schools and low-income neighborhoods. Food no longer stratifies by wealth but by imagination. Meanwhile, architecture starts to shift. Kitchens grow larger again, not industrial, but inviting. Cities carve out more space for community gardens and shared cooking plazas. Apartment buildings offer fermentation lockers, rooftop mushroom towers, aquaponics corridors. It's weird. It's wonderful. People reconnect with the ritual of preparing food, not to survive, but to delight, to create, to feel anchored in a world moving both too fast and just fast enough. Now zoom out again. Economies reshape. Livelihoods once tied to livestock evolve. Some former ranchers become ecosystem stewards, restoring prairie lands, managing biodiversity corridors. Others become cheese-free cheesemakers or invent entirely new professions. Soil whisperer, carbon farm broker, spice sommelier. Historians still argue whether the Industrial Revolution's job displacement was a net good, but here something different unfolds. The shift isn't just technological, it's values-based, and that changes the tone of the whole human story. Religion too has a moment. Without sacrificial animals, faith rituals become more symbolic, focused on gratitude, generosity, interconnectedness. A rabbi somewhere crafts a new Passover ritual involving olive oil tastings. A monk grows heirloom beans in silence. An imam teaches kids how to bless lentils. These aren't replacements, they're reimaginings. Faith moves with food. And what about art? You walk through a gallery in this future world and spot old oil paintings of hunted boars, roast feasts, and meat market chaos. Then you turn the corner and see sculptures of jackfruit busts, neon-lit spice racks, abstract lentil mandalas. Musicians release ambient albums using the sizzling sounds of stir-fries and bean bubble gurgles. One performance artist recreates a 7-course meal using only sound and scent. Tickets are sold out for months. This is not a sterile world. It's not boring. It's not made of bland tofu cubes and sadness. It's vibrant, chaotic, deeply sensual, and somehow more honest. A fringe futurist suggests that without the daily backdrop of animal suffering, humans become emotionally more resilient, less numb, more attuned to nonverbal signals, more empathetic in subtle ways. Couples report fewer arguments. Children show increased cooperation. Workplace drama doesn't vanish, but HR notices fewer lunchroom meltdowns. Is that causal? Hard to say. Historians still argue whether ancient Spartan diets made them emotionally cold or just militarily efficient. But in this future, food is no longer a source of violence, even abstracted, and that might leave a mark. Now here comes the final turn. You're at a museum exhibit called The Last Meat Eaters. It's full of artifacts, old McDonald's wrappers, bone-handled knives, black and white footage of butchers in stained aprons. A group of teenagers walks by giggling. One of them whispers, "Wait, they ate that? On purpose?" You feel a strange tug in your chest. Not shame, not pride, just perspective. That was a chapter, a long, complicated, tender, brutal chapter of humanity. But it ended. And the story kept going, not with fanfare, not with alien tech, but with millions of little choices. Curry instead of kebab, lentils instead of lamb, community instead of conquest. And now, here you are, on the edge of sleep, imagining the world you might wake up to. A world quieter, greener, more flavorful than ever. A world where you don't need to chew through muscle to feel full or whole. But don't drift off just yet. One last chapter remains, one final slow breath to take together. Let's wind it all down, shall we? You lie there, half tucked beneath your blanket, listening to the soft hum of the fan and the world you've just wandered through, no longer full of meat, but never empty. One last time, we tilt the camera down, slow the music, and take a look at what remains when the plates are cleared, the lights are low, and the forks stop clinking. You don't need numbers now. You don't need protein charts or greenhouse graphs or arguments about what cavemen did. You've heard enough. You've tasted it, felt it. You've wandered through bodies and borders, memories and markets. What's left is something gentler, something closer. It's your breath, steady and warm. It's your hands, still capable of crafting a meal, a life, a new way of being. It's your kitchen, waiting for the morning light and a cutting board ready for whatever comes next. Because now the conversation shifts from, why give up meat, to, what did we find when we let it go? We found a quieter heartbeat in our cities. We found mushrooms that tasted like stories. We found meals that nourished more than our bellies. We found ourselves cooking not just to eat, but to care, to connect. And the beauty of it all, this wasn't a sacrifice, it was a homecoming. Across the world, from bamboo huts to glowing apartment towers, humans rediscovered the ancient truth. Food is not just about survival, it's an act of imagination, a mirror of our choices, a language that everyone speaks, even when words fall short. Even the skeptics began to notice moods lifting, soil softening, oceans calming. The air carried fewer sighs, more laughter. And in homes where meat once sizzled, now came the scent of cardamom, charred corn, slow-roasted yams. It wasn't silence, it was a new kind of music. Somewhere out there, a child grows up never knowing the word slaughterhouse. Instead, they know words like nourish, harvest, and celebrate. They're not deprived, they're delighted. They ask questions not about what's missing, but about what's possible. And as for you, you're part of that turning point. Even lying here, half asleep, imagining a world remade one meal at a time. You're part of something unfolding, say, like bread rising or seeds cracking open in spring. Historians still argue whether great change begins with revolution or rest, but here's a softer theory. Maybe the future begins on a quiet night, with one curious thought, one empty plate, and a willingness to dream a different kind of full. Now hush. We've wandered far tonight from campfires and hunting spears to solar cookers and seitan kebabs. We've tasted myth, memory, microbes, and moral codes. But we end not with facts, not with fear, but with the gentle exhale of a world learning to live with just a little more grace. So close your eyes. You're safe here. The world is still turning, and tomorrow there will be flavor. Let it all melt now. No more questions, no more maps to follow. Just you, drifting soft and slow through this warm, gentle hum of a world being reimagined. Your body is still, your breath is calm, that little ache in your back eases, that flutter in your thoughts fades. Somewhere lentils are simmering, somewhere the moonlight touches rows of ripening tomatoes, somewhere hands are slicing herbs with care and stories are being told between bites. But not here, not right now. Here it's just your breath, the rise and fall, like waves, like a lullaby. No more lists, no more debates. Just that small sense of wonder that humans, in all their mess and brilliance, are learning to eat kindly, to live gently, to change slowly but surely. You don't need to remember everything we said tonight. Just carry the warmth, the softness, the invitation to begin again. Whenever you're ready, feel your arms go heavy, your shoulders sink, your mind unlace its boots and rest by the door. The future can wait. Tonight you sleep in a quieter world, and it's still yours.